In the 1920s, a psychologist at Stanford named Louis N. Terman went looking for genius. He tested roughly 250,000 California schoolchildren, kept the ones who scored highest, and followed them for the rest of their lives. He expected to watch a generation of extraordinary humans unfold. What he actually got was a group of people who were mostly healthy, mostly employed, mostly fine. And two boys he turned away for scoring too low went on to win Nobel Prizes. So if a very high IQ is such a gift, why did the largest study of gifted children ever run end in a shrug? Stay with me, because the answer is not that intelligence is useless. The answer is that it was never a shortcut. It was never a softer life with the answers already loaded. What you actually got, if you are one of these people, is an engine built for a road that most days does not exist. Today, I want to show you what that engine does to a person when it has nowhere to go. It is 11:40 at night. Your body is finished. You have work in 7 hours. And your brain has just decided that this is the perfect moment to redesign the seating chart of a wedding you attended in 2019. Not because it matters, because it is there. Here's the thing about a car engine. It has an idle speed, the slowest it can turn over without stalling. Most engines idle low and quiet. Yours idles high. It sits in the driveway at midnight with the hood still warm, running at 3 times the speed of every other car on the street, going absolutely nowhere. That is what people miss when they call you smart. They picture faster answers. They do not picture a mind that cannot be put in neutral. You read a menu and see the pricing strategy behind it. Someone sends you a 3-word message and you run 4 readings of it before you reply. You are asked to pick a paint color for one wall and you end up reading about how light behaves on a matte finish. You sit in a meeting where the decision was obvious in the first 4 minutes and you spend the other 56 watching the room walk toward it. Nobody chooses any of that. Nobody chooses to notice. And it started early. You were 9, done with the worksheet in 6 minutes, staring at the clock while the room caught up. Somewhere in there, a teacher wrote the word distracted next to your name. Sound familiar? But here's where it gets interesting, because the intensity does not stop at thinking. In the 1960s, a Polish psychiatrist named Kazimierz Dabrowski spent years working with gifted children and noticed something that did not fit the stereotype at all. They did not simply think more. They responded more in every direction. He described what he called overexcitabilities, and there were several kinds: imaginational, emotional, sensory, physical. Read that list again, because it explains a lot of your life. It explains the tag in the back of your shirt that you cannot stop feeling, the fluorescent light in the office that hums at a pitch nobody else in the room seems to hear, the documentary about deep-sea creatures that you started at 11 and finished at 2 in the morning with your heart going. It explains the leg that bounces under the desk all day, the pacing you do in the kitchen while you think, one lap, then another, until the tea goes cold. It explains why a small unfairness in a group chat can sit in your stomach for 3 days, and why you can rebuild a 2-minute conversation from last April in full color, including the pause before they answered. And it explains the strangest part of your childhood. You were 8 and you already wanted to know what happens when people die, and whether it was fair that some children had no shoes. The adults called it a phase. Dabrowski saw it in child after child. Big questions arrive early in these kids, and they arrive without a bigger person inside to hold them. The nervous system that came with the fast processor came turned up too. You did not get one dial raised. You got all of them at once. And people who only ever see the answers you produce have no idea what the volume is like in there. You know that feeling, right? When somebody tells you how lucky you are, and you cannot find a polite way to explain what luck sounds like at 3 in the morning. But here's the part almost nobody says out loud, and it is not about thinking at all. It is about arithmetic. 100 years ago, a researcher named Lita Hollingworth spent her career with children whose scores sat far above the average, and she noticed something plain and sad. The higher a child scored, the harder time that child had finding anyone to play with. Not because the other children were unkind. Because the further out you sit from the middle, the fewer people are standing out there with you. That is not a personality problem. That is a head count. So you learn to translate. You have the whole thought, and then you shave it down before it leaves your mouth. Because the full version takes 8 minutes, and you have watched eyes go flat at minute 2. You learn which parts to cut. You get very good at the short version. You get so good that most people never meet the long one. And here is the cruel part of the trade. Cut it down and you sound simple. Leave it whole and you sound arrogant. There is a very narrow lane between those two, and you have been driving in it since school. You have heard both verdicts. Someone tells you to stop overcomplicating things. Someone else asks, half joking, why you have to make everything so deep. Same week, same person sometimes. So you go quiet, and quiet gets read as cold. And you add that to the list of things about yourself you have decided not to explain to anyone. Have you ever finished explaining something, watched the other person nod politely, and felt more alone than before you opened your mouth? Then you go home from a dinner where everyone was warm and kind, and you liked all of them. And you feel unaccountably lonely on the drive back. That is the loneliness people never believe you about. It is not an empty room. It is a full room where nobody speaks your first language. And this is where it gets complicated, because the thing that is supposed to protect you does not. Keith Stanovich, a psychologist who has spent his career on this exact question, showed something that should be far more famous than it is. A high score on an intelligence test tells you almost nothing about whether a person reasons well. He even built a word for the gap: dysrationalia. Being clever and being wise run on separate tracks, and his research with Richard West found that people who score higher are not spared the ordinary thinking traps. In some of that work, they were worse at spotting the bias sitting in their own head. Sit with that for a second, because you have lived it, the relationship you should have left, and the elegant 5-part argument you built for staying. The job you knew was wrong in month 2, that you talked yourself into for 4 more years. You did not stay because you missed the evidence. You stayed because you were skilled enough to defend it. A powerful mind is an excellent lawyer. It will take whatever case you hand it, and it will win. It also sees too many roads. Most people looking at a decision see 2 options. You see 9, plus the way each one quietly fails in year 3. So you stand in the kitchen with your keys in your hand and choose nothing, and then you call yourself lazy for it. That is not laziness. That is a searchlight with no off switch, sweeping a field that keeps getting bigger the longer you look. And underneath all of it sits the sentence you have carried since you were 9 years old. An adult read a test score out loud and told you what you were going to become. So much potential. It sounded like a compliment at the time. It has functioned like a debt ever since. Every year that you are not extraordinary, you feel late on the payment. Does that not ring true? So let me say the thing you actually came here for. There is nothing wrong with you. You are not wasting it. You are not a disappointment walking around in a body that once tested well. You were handed a mind with more power than an ordinary Tuesday requires, and then you were told the power itself was supposed to make you happy. It was never going to. An engine does not make a car happy. It makes a car capable. And an engine is not judged by how quietly it idles. Everything you have been filing as evidence of failure is that engine with no road under it. The midnight rewrites of old conversations. The flatness after 4 hours with people you genuinely love. The unfinished projects that were never boredom. Only a mind that had already solved the interesting part and got nothing for the rest. None of that is a defect. It is torque with nowhere to pull. And I am not telling you this makes you better than anyone. It does not. Kindness has never needed a high score. Some of the wisest people you will ever meet would test unremarkably and be perfectly happy about it. Different engines, different roads. But you can stop apologizing for the sound yours makes. You do not need a smaller mind. You need somewhere to put the one you have. A problem big enough to take the whole thing. 1 or 2 people who can sit inside the long version without checking the time. That is the road. It is real, and it is usually narrower and quieter than the one you were promised when you were 9. If some part of this felt uncomfortably specific, tell me which part. Leave a comment with the thought your brain handed you last night at midnight, the useless, brilliant one, the seating chart from 2019. I read them, And I promise you they are stranger and better company than you think. Somewhere out there is a road that finally asks for all of it. Keep the engine warm. Subscribe to keep decoding yourself, and I'll see you in the next.